Welcome, everybody. We're excited for this month's live Freight Market Report webinar. We're going to be reporting on the trends, the market data that we've collected and all of that, and very excited to have an extra guest this month, joined by Blake Tablak, who's the CEO of Trax. We're all going to introduce ourselves real quick and then kind of get into it, go through the data trends that we're seeing, and then having a special emphasis at the end of the show on artificial intelligence and the impact that's having in supply chain operations, what leaders need to know. So be sure to stay tuned in until the end. So Blake, why don't you kick us off? Just remind us who you are, although we all know who you are, tell the audience, and yeah, we're excited to have you, so welcome.
Yeah, Blake Tablak. I am a proud father of these two young ones behind me, husband to Sarah Tablak, and obviously, maybe least important, chief executive of Trax. And I've been here for a couple of years, and great company. Love being here, and we have a fabulous market and really wonderful people. So really looking forward to today.
Awesome. All right, and Steve Beda, who is our OG and the one who's always giving us all the great intel on data. You want to let the audience remind the audience who you are, and we're glad to have you here.
Yeah, well, thanks, Joy. And it's so exciting to have Blake on the call with me. I'm humbled. We have such a knowledgeable guest on today, and look forward to the conversation. So I'm in a unique position. I get to not only monitor the market, but I spend a lot of time with our customers as EVP of Customer Engagement and Advisory, helping them navigate these murky waters. So interpreting data, best practices, how to really improve the value and the realization of value of our data, and how to really lower cost to serve in their relative markets. So glad to be on the call today with you and Blake and Brianna.
All right. And Brianna, give us a little intro.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brianna Kuhlman, leading marketing here at Trax. So working hand in hand with Blake and Steve to bring these market insights to everyone. So I think it'll be a great conversation. Thank you, Blake, for being our special guest this week.
Yeah, stoked to have all of you. All right, so let's kick it off. We're definitely seeing lots go on. Steve, it sounds like you've done some special research in advance of this. I know we've all been closely watching a lot of different trends that are happening in the market. So give us kind of the 30,000-foot view. I'm interested to know what's caught your eye, and maybe even especially things that have caught your eye that we've also seen in the news, and what your perspective is on those things.
No, thanks, Joy. Yeah, you can't be asleep at the wheel these days for sure, because things change the minute you open up in the morning and take a look at what's happening. Obviously, we have some Fed conversations to have today in terms of that's at least, if you remember from our last get together, we weren't sure. I predicted this would happen, and it did. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I did do a little bit of extra research because, as I stated last time, sometimes the numbers can be misleading when you look at them at face value and the KPIs. We'll talk a little bit more about that today, but I did a little extra research because one of the comments that was made is, are carriers really investing in capacity? Are they not? So one of the leading indicators of whether these carriers are investing in capacity is looking at the purchasing of large vehicles in an index that is actually published in terms of the investment of large vehicles. Obviously, diesel trucks, obviously is a key component, and that's been tracked over a long period of time. Well, I'm here to say that the trend is down year over year, and it's not just down, it's continuously going down. So what does that say? Well, the carriers are not investing right now in additional capacity. So that answers an interesting perspective or question around this freight inversion, some things happening in the market, but that's a leading indicator of where they think capacity will be needed or not, and that controls supply and demand, that controls pricing and all the other things. So when we get into interpreting some LMI data here in a minute and looking at some of this interesting upswings in inventory and downswings in pricing and utilization changes, some of this will make sense. But that was an additional research that I did, and so that's just an interesting foretelling of some things that the carriers believe, and that is they're not heavily investing in capacity right now. So they're cutting costs too, by the way, and that's just as important to them as it is to shippers, for which we'll talk about today as well. Okay. So the waters are still murky. Joy.
Very.
Now more than ever, good data, and we'll talk about this, good data, good ability to forecast, and not necessarily rely on history to tell you what to do, is also relevant to the conversation. So I was talking to a large high-tech manufacturer this morning, and they had pulled a bunch of inventory forward using air freight to beat the tariff impact. We talked about that last time. So now they have all this inventory and they're trying to move that inventory out. Because they have a lot of inventory, they paid a lot extra to get it there because of air freight. They normally use ocean. Now they're trying to burn that inventory down, but they're using slower methods of transport to move that inventory out to their customers. So what's interesting is I just read an article today that LTL is down and maybe full truckload is up a bit, but it's down relative as well because maybe people are using intermodal, which is the slowest form of transport, saves cost because they have that inventory already on hand that they built up because of the tariff. So all these things play into the numbers and trying to figure out what's going on. And of course, we got peak season coming up, so that'll be another conversation. But anyway, that's just a real top level view, I guess, of the numbers.
I appreciate that. I think you said the 7-letter T word, so I suppose we can't not. I mean, is this the song that doesn't end? I feel like we talk about it every single month something new, and we're living in a bit of a reactive state because tariffs and where everything will land feels like a little bit of a black box. I mean, I know, Blake, you have some conversations with customers of Trax, and you're obviously having conversations with other executives in supply chain organizations and technology organizations. What's the general sentiment out there? Do we feel like things have shaken out, or is there still a great deal of uncertainty?
No, definitely not. My son is 14 years old, and in high school they start teaching you about drinking and driving and the ills of that, et cetera. And they sent him home with these goggles that were really blurry and very difficult to see. And I put them on and I said, "Look, it's like being an economist today. Like, really difficult to see what's going on. Like, where is everything?" It's funny. I will say, I'm old enough to have lived through 3 recessions, possibly 4 if you count sort of a very brief moment in 2009 when everybody freaked out, and then it was like, nope, free money. What I can tell you is I talk to CFOs, I talk to heads of global manufacturing and heads of global logistics operations. And heads of procurement. I mean, those are sort of the 4 kind of groups I talk to. All of them universally are saying the same things. From the CFO down, there's a huge cost compression requirement that's going on. I talked to one of the world's largest automotive manufacturers the other day, and the CFO came down and said, here's your number, and talked to the operations team, and manufacturing and logistics were discussing it, and they said, I don't think we can get there. Of course, the question is why? Well, because we can't even see how to get there. So the information that we have available to us is so murky, we're not sure where to go optimize. It's in logistics for, it's been 14, 16 years now. Our major job was to get things from A to B. That was it, because people are buying stuff. We got to get it from A to B. A to B is revenue. A to B is margin. A to B is I'm going to hit the number. Like, that's been job number 1. And I think for the first time in probably 14, 15 years, cost pressure is maybe outstripping getting things from A to B. Still got to get it from A to B, but man, there's pressure being put on from the executive team. And the consumer isn't super confident right now. We keep seeing that in the data. And so if you decide you're going to take the tariff fees and load them into your price, you may get an unwanted result. People may stop buying it, and then you miss on your revenue line. If you're a CFO, it's a lot easier to look internally and say, how do we just cut costs to make up for the cost of the tariff? How do we improve? And there's lots of leakage in companies, so you probably find enough of it for now. But man, that pond gets real small real fast. My great uncle Chuck passed away some years ago, but he used to say, Blake, no one saved their way into the Fortune 500. So that pond gets small, and you do have to figure out a way to grow your business again. But there is a lot of pressure in that environment right now, and not a lot of answers. So that's real. And I've spent most of my time talking to executives about what opportunities are out there, and there are a lot from our perspective. But yeah, it's tough sledding for a lot of people right now.
You know, Blake, I might just piggyback on what you just said. So I had a couple conversations this week about there's no such thing as a maintenance phase anymore. If you're not innovating and doing things to improve cost to serve, lower cost, automate, become more efficient, you're in a losing game.
Yeah.
Period. There's just no question about it. So where you are on that journey, if you started early, great. If you're just getting in, you got some catching up to do, but there's no maintaining in this market for sure.
No. Yeah.
So the reality is what you're essentially describing is kind of this bi-directional pressure, right? We've got pressure from the top, pressure from the bottom, right? From executives, from consumers. We're heading into peak season for certain businesses. What does that then mean? What kind of thinking are you guiding Trax clients into? What kind of conversations are you having, and how are people preparing, given that, you know, like you were describing earlier, Steve, there's this unique dynamic around warehousing or modal, you know, choosing modes based on concern about tariffs and pricing and all that.
Well, you know, we're going to blend concepts a little bit here. Forgive me for doing that, but okay, so let's take in consideration CPI. We just talked about trying to quell price increases from tariffs. Those may be one-time things, by the way. We don't know. The deals are still being done. There was a new UK deal just signed. Boy, if you're in data infrastructure and power, you're killing it right now, because everybody's needing more energy to support AI initiatives. And
that's right.
And right, so you're feeling the love now in that area. But let's face it, consumers are being very cost conscious. So that means that your product areas have to also reflect consumer sentiment. So you're picking and choosing what you're stocking up. You're having to predict the needs of the consumer coming out. Now, maybe this move by the Fed will create more demand, right? It hopefully creates more jobs, and that's the reason they did what they did. They felt the inflation numbers were maybe transitory. Mm-hmm. Okay, you can read it all kinds of different ways, but if it is truly tariff-based, that will eventually subside. But they felt that the job numbers were more important than the inflationary risk, so they went dovish. There's going to be another 0.5 point coming probably by year end, so that'd be a total of 0.75. That ought to create more investment desire and cheaper capital to invest, and also probably trickle down to consumers, which will have maybe more feel better about discretionarily spending that money on product. But make no mistake, it's still a very cost conscious, discount oriented market. So retailers are going to have to be really good about picking what products they predict will go in this coming peak season. And of course, they're still burning off. And as I said last time, I do think there's a bit of risk in the numbers in terms of capacity. We don't know yet. We know carriers aren't investing in equipment. We see prices going down, which I thought prices would go up. Maybe they will eventually. But that freight inversion, I've seen it's still in a very equilibrium state. So it'll be interesting to see whether companies that feel that there is excess capacity really there, whether that plays out when peak season comes and you need to get the products from A to B, as Blake mentioned. So it's an interesting time, but that's kind of some thoughts on that. Blake, I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, listen. I like how you described that pressure from the top, pressure from the bottom. Like pressure makes diamonds, right? I've met so many of our customers and different people. Man, if you're in operations, you're used to pressure. So the good news is, from a logistics standpoint, supply chain, this is a group of people who are very used to pressure and having to perform. And so I think what we're going to find is many companies come out of this far better than they were before, and it's a good opportunity to go innovate, right? What I would say is some of the things I've been talking to executives about are the biggest areas of leakage you have are areas where you can't see and you have questions, and you've asked these questions. Like, you're smart, you've been an executive for a long time, and you go, I wonder about, what do you wonder about? And I've received a few really interesting questions from people on the sort of consumer electronics side, and also B2B electronic manufacturing, some industrial manufacturing, but mostly sort of getting to the consumer side. I had this question that kept coming up, which is, can you show me how many times a same size package has left a distribution center and gone to the same address in a 24-hour period? And I was like, what a weird question. Certainly you have 3PLs and 4PLs, and they must be able to get you that data. there was just this look, and it was 3 years I've been asking this question, and all of them said the same thing. It was like 5 years I've been asking this question, 4 years, and I went, okay, we'll answer it for you. Okay. Within a couple of hours, we'd given them an answer, and every single case was identical. There were hundreds of packages leaving these distribution centers and going to the same address in a 24-hour period. Well, it turns out it was more of an operational problem in how they were approaching order fulfillment than it was the 3PL's issue of consolidating and doing all that. In most cases, some cases, the 3PL was being instructed to do something that it was, in not directly in line with what the company wanted. But that was a great sort of moment of, oh, there is a way for me to cut costs. Like, there is actually a way for me to get more efficient, and by the way, not hurt the customer's experience, or not hurt my partner's experience in this. And that's really like hierarchy of needs. I want to be great with my customer, great with my partner, and get my product there on time. Like, those three things are always, going to be first for most companies. So if I could figure out a way to cut costs and improve those things, now I'm really hitting on all cylinders. So those are kinds of things that we've been talking to some of our clients about. Vendor consolidation or carrier consolidation. If you have enough and you have enough people you're working with and you can consolidate down to just a couple, you may be able to get better rates and better performance and better predictability. Like, who doesn't want that? So now you can see that in a report. You can see how many times and how many vendors are using in different lanes. And now you can start thinking that through. So we're doing a lot with data to try and show different aspects of what's going on. And here's some areas where you could get better performance and cut costs. And that's like the holy grail, right? So you think about pressure, that's a diamond right there. Not only did I cut costs, I actually got better at what I did. And I think that's I think we're going to see a lot more of that. Like I said, the logistics industry is just filled with people who are so used to immense pressure that I think this is just going to be a great opportunity for a lot of people to raise up in the organization.
Well, and Blake, just to kind of comment on that, I was having a conversation this week, because of how different products are doing in the market, and the focus on cost-cutting measures and demand around those different kind of products, it's really important to be able to have visibility of cost down to the product level.
Oh, yeah.
So you start looking at not only general data needs, but then you look at the granularity for which you have visibility of this. And it becomes really important to be able to understand at that level, both inbound and outbound, where you're starting to make inventory decisions, balancing those with on-time delivery, cost at the product level. And that's not always available. You would probably agree, Blake, that a lot of our customers lack that granularity of visibility across their entire supply chain. So it's important. You got to have it.
Our typical prospect or client is going to be a global 5,000, global 10,000 company. They're all huge, right? That's largely where we spend most of our time. And the answer is at times shocking, but I think I've gotten kind of used to it. Almost all of them cannot see down to the SKU level. They can't see the total landed cost down to the SKU level. And if you're going to make improvements, you have to have really good data, and you've got to be able to get down to that level. There may be some, low-hanging fruit sitting out there for some people. I hate to say it like that, and I'm sure there'll be some of that. But as more and more pressure gets applied, and there's less and less of that, you're going to have to be able to have access to that information. And and it's shocking how many companies do not.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. Or they have some of it, but there are big data gaps that don't, permit them to do it across either all inbound, outbound, or all regions in the world. So data is king. It still is, and it's becoming more and more important as we navigate these murky waters.
And I know I'm foreshadowing, but we're definitely going to talk about this later. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, so that's exactly what I was going to pivot to. You guys
good
job of segueing. Yeah. Thank you. As we talk, data is great, right? And data is meaningless without context, utility, application, right? So when we talk about extracting value out of data, the key mechanism to do it, right, is artificial intelligence. And if we're thinking about, and other machine learning, natural language processing, all those kind of technologies. So when we're talking about the, trends of emerging technology applied to supply chain, especially inefficiencies, logistics, et cetera. AI is it, right? Everybody's talking about AI all the time. We launched an AI and supply chain blog, and, we're keen to stay aware of what's going on. But, Blake, like you said in the green room before this
Yeah.
For this webinar, you literally just read the MIT study, right?
Yeah.
How many? What's the percentage?
95% of Gen AI projects returned zero, not one thin dime. That was shocking to me.
Yeah.
We've had so much success internally, and I've watched our metrics get wildly better, and I'm like, how 95%?
Yeah.
How's that possible? The good news is people are investing, right? And so they're learning, and sometimes learning has a cost. I joke every time my children walk in and say something to the effect of, "Hey, Dad, I learned a great lesson today." I'm like, "Man, what did that cost me? Like, how much?" Right?
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah, like, and so maybe we're learning a lot along this process, but man, 95% zero, not one thin dime. So
What's interesting, Blake, that people think AI is the answer to the problem, but the real thing is having the data to feed the AI and the models that create the answers.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that, then the AI itself isn't going to help you. I don't know. You might want to comment on that a little bit.
Yeah, I will. So I would say two of the maybe the most preeminent advisory firms on the planet, right? Deloitte and NTT Data. These are great companies. Okay, phenomenal. Both of them have had different conversations where you'll hear them talk about this over and over again. The fundamental underlying data set that you're working with will be the sole determiner of your success with artificial intelligence. Okay, I will give you I'll give you a really specific example of this. We always joke about Melvin with the red stapler, right? I think that was the guy's name in Office Space. It's like, my stapler. Okay. It turns out, I think a lot of companies don't appreciate that the actual problem of getting AI off the ground starts in Melvin with the red stapler's desk. Okay. And I will give you the example. Most companies treat freight audit as an independent problem. I'm going to get a freight auditor for parcel because I've got a really good guy that really knows how to do that. I'm going to get somebody for Europe because I really have somebody who's great for that. I'm going to get somebody for North American over the road, or maybe just North America. Okay. And all of a sudden they end up with 3 or 4 freight auditors. And then, Africa, nobody bothers to audit those. We just take them as they are. Or maybe Latin America, we just take them as they are. Okay. That's literally at the very bottom level. That's Melvin with the red stapler. That is the basement. All right. Now what you've just done is you've taken all of the information from all of your carriers and given it to 3, maybe 4 different groups, and they're sending you that information. Okay. Same carriers, by the way. You're working with some carriers globally. You're working with them, across multiple borders in different capacities. And so you go to answer a simple question. How much did I spend with FedEx last year? What was the breakdown of the spend? And people are like, because you decided that you as a company need to own the consolidation normalization layer. So all these freight auditors are sending you all this data and you don't have anybody to receive it. So what do? You tell them, just put it in the data lake. Just put it in the data. It'll go in the data lake. We will deal with that later. Okay. And then the CFO shows up and says, I need you to find $500 million. And you're looking at the data lake and you're going, it's in there. Like it's in the computer. I just can't get it out. Okay. This is, if you started at the basement and you realize that the data sets that you need to be normalized, you have got to understand what fuel surcharge is across every single carrier you have. One line, you've got to be able to see it in one line. You have to be able to understand the left-handed truck driver accessorial fee. And how do I get out of that? Why am I getting accessorial fees for hazardous materials for stuff that's just plastic? Oh, it's because I have it all bundled together on a pallet with stuff that has batteries, but there's only 3 packages in there that have batteries. So why am I taking it for the rest? It's like, there are a million different pieces of knowledge and information that you need to have in order to make those calls and those decisions. But the minute you went down to the basement and you said, I'm going to get 5 Melvins with 5 red staplers, all those 5 Melvins have given you a different version of what reality is. And there's no way as a logistics organization, you're going to invest. I mean, we invest almost $10 million a year in just figuring this problem out. So if somebody's going to write you a check for $10 million to go figure this out, congratulations. As a logistics organization, you'll be just fine. If they won't, really got to consider that sort of core data layer has got to be normalized to the point where in our case, you can, natural language type of question into a prompt and it's going to give you an answer. But that's because that data layer has already been normalized for you. It's already been set up in such a way that it sees variations and can alert you to things. It can make decisions on your behalf and do it very accurately. all of those things are only possible when the core data set is normalized. Artificial intelligence still cannot make signal out of noise. There are some cases where it can, but for the most part, you get too much noise in the system, it's going to give you really, really, really bad advice. And you don't want that. That'll set you back even further. So yeah, I loved hearing from, Deloitte and NTT Data recently when they were hammering on this topic. And I'm going, most companies can't get there because they set up their infrastructure incorrectly to begin with. So yeah.
Well, I'll just compliment what Blake just said. So I was on a call this week. Almost all of our large customers, and Blake can attest to this, are doing some sort of digital transformation, some project related to it. And they all have AI embedded in them some way, somehow.
Yeah.
So I was on a call this week with a customer, and yeah, we got these AI initiatives going on, but we have a data quality issue. Oh, yeah.
Shocking.
All the answers are wrong.
Yeah.
And it comes back down to exactly what Blake says. And what you start when you start unpeeling the onion back, you find lack of ASNs coming inbound from supply. Well, we have a data gap, don't we? How do you make up for that? Inconsistency of the ASN quality, missing components. So, it used to be easy. Can you pay an invoice? Yeah, sure. We can still pay an invoice if we don't have all of that, but there's no value in the information coming out of it unless you really have all that information tied together consistently and normalized. And the other thing is, as Blake said, is it's the data values. It's not even whether an element exists. It's what are the canonical values within that thing that mean something, equipment type, container size.
Yeah.
Whatever the case is, that all has value too. So if that's all scrambled and meaningless, then you lose the granularity you need to slice and dice the data, ultimately produce something that is a cost to serve by product, by geo, by BU, by whatever, and then set targets. And then why am I off? Why did we miss the target? Well, we just used a bunch of air freight because we wanted to beat a tariff. Okay, well, that's going to raise your cost to serve.
Yeah.
And why did you do it? Can you explain it, et cetera, et cetera? So yeah, it's just fundamental to the success of any transformation project. And as Blake can attest to this, we're heavily involved in these projects with our customers to accelerate the ability, and they all want to do it faster, to get to the objective sooner. And to do that, you got to have good data. Mm-hmm. No doubt about it.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on the digital transformation. I was an executive at a company called Udacity, which Accenture bought, a great company, and it dealt with sort of upskilling employees. And at one point, there was a document that came out that said 90 to 95% of all digital transformations fail to achieve the desired result. And I hearkened back when I saw the MIT study. I went, yeah, this is the same thing is going on, but it's a different problem. The problem wasn't, and they outlined this in both, the problem is the underlying fundamental, it hasn't been met. In the case of AI, it's the data. In the case of the digital transformation, it was the skill sets. You can go out and get Deloitte and NTT to come in and do a bunch of great stuff for you, and they will, and they're amazing. At some point, your people have to be really intelligent, and that was the digital transformation problem. I think we're sort of moving, like a lot of projects have gotten off the ground, and that part's gotten better. But now we're in a new realm. And that new realm is moving very quickly. I had a chief supply chain officer say to me, my CEO walked into my office and said, I need to do something in AI. And we just laughed, right? And it's like, yeah, every CEO, this is how we got our journey started. I said to my board, we're going to make an investment. Here's what it is. And we're going to get good at AI. In retrospect, it's the dumbest thing anybody's ever said sitting at a table. We're going to get AI. In hindsight, it's probably the smartest thing we ever did, right? And we failed a ton. I mean, we screwed so many things up early on. Even now, as we try new things, we make mistakes. But I will tell you, the one asset I had that I knew no one else had was I had 25 years worth of data that came from every mode, almost every currency, almost every country, because that's what we do. Any mode, any country, any currency, legal operate, and we can operate in that environment. And that for us was just a huge asset. And so I've had the firsthand experience on the AI side that your data will be the difference between you winning and losing. If you don't have really, really good, solid foundations, you're in trouble.
So I'm interested to know, and we'll wrap up a little bit after this, but as we go into, Q4 into 2026, we're facing these, leadership imperatives, right?
Yeah.
Do AI, right? Which to your
Yeah.
point doesn't really make sense, but regardless, right? That's the
Let's
imperative.
start somewhere. Yeah.
We got to respond.
Yeah.
What would you say are some of the pitfalls to avoid,
Mhm.
right? Launching into AI initiatives, headlong, and then some of the, strategies to adopt, like some of the things to say, like, hey, here's a high priority. So things to avoid, things to do.
Sure. So I'll go first. I would go look for the pockets where you have really good data. Okay, really good data. Go look for those, and then go look for the ones where you have really bad data. So like the piece of paper you have at the check-in where everybody's handwriting, like this, that's really bad data because it's not accessible by anybody. But maybe you've got a really good data set for weights and measures, something like that. Okay. Start with the place where you have the great data. It may not be your biggest win, just to be clear. It may not be a $20 million return or a $500 million return, but you will have success, and success breeds success. Okay, so you start there, identify those two areas. Start with the data, identify the areas where you have the best and the least. Second thing I would say is figure out what question you want to ask. So when we talk to our customers about a data strategy, we're really clear, you don't need a data strategy. Okay? What you need is a series of goals and outcomes that you're desirous of, and the data strategy will follow that. What questions are you trying to answer? Right? I want to understand what my total landed cost is down to the SKU, and I want to be able to break the logistics part of that out into its respective components, whether that's freight, accessorials, et cetera. That's a great question to ask. I want to understand the performance of my carriers, cost, quality, speed, carbon. I want to understand that. That's a great question to ask. Once you ask your questions, you will look back and realize, I can't answer that question. But remember, we started with what was my good data and what was my bad data. At least now you know where to go and start fixing those problems. I will tell everybody that will listen, start with the end in mind, start working your way back, and the things to avoid. Do not say we are going to go take on this massive problem over here and use AI to solve it until you understand what the underlying data sets are. Because if you don't have them, it will fail. RPA, by the way, RPA was like the OG of artificial intelligence. It's sort of like, yeah, we're going to do all these tasks. And I watched a myriad of those things fail. Yeah. People finally started to figure it out. They'd be like, oh, I can't just deploy it everywhere. I've got to be very specific about how I deploy these things. And I got to be really well understood and well documented processes. So this is just I would say it's just another case. AI is a huge disruptor, and it is going to make massive changes to huge organizations and many jobs. What I will say is it is not going to do it quickly unless your fundamental underlying data structure is there. So the pace and speed I would operate at would be pretty high. If I'm an executive, I would assign these kinds of tasks and goals to my leaders. I'd put it in their comp plans. I would figure out ways to get them motivated in the right direction. And then, by the way, pay for them to get educated. I do it. Anybody in my organization says they want to go take a Udacity course, I'll pay for it. I'm fine. I want you to be the smartest human being on the planet when it comes to this kind of stuff. And I don't care what job you're in here. I want everybody down to our facilities people to understand exactly how AI works and what it's possible, because they can come up with a great idea just as well as I can. So that is, get smart people, make sure you understand your underlying data sets and pick a few areas where you can win out of the gate. And I think you'll find great success there. And by the way, if you need help and you're one of our customers, you can call us. We're always happy to come out.
Love it. Awesome. Steve, what are your thoughts?
Well, I would say think smart, start small and scale fast is what Blake is saying. Listen, I would agree 100%. I'd add two things. One, if you have limited time or budget to do these things, prioritize by material impact of the outcome. Meaning, take a look at it, try to put a business case together and try to solve the most important problem first as you go through. That's another way to think about it. Now, maybe data is a constraint, that's fine. But if I have 5 opportunities that are really great and I only have so much budget and time, do them in the order of material impact, at least try to get the understanding of it. And I would say the only other thing is look at your process as well as your data. If you have a bad process, AI isn't going to fix that. So look at your process as well as look at your data. And I think that'll generate the desired outcomes as well. So But other than that, I think Blake covered it all.
Awesome. All right. Well, great. That was a good note to go out on. I think that's some practical guidance. Brianna, you want to tell people how they can get involved with kind of the monthly freight market report and our AI and supply chain content?
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully everyone can hear me.
Breaking up just a little bit. So
My
no worries. So we will drop
audio
we release the freight market report every month.
Video has been a little delayed, but just see the comments in the. Sorry, can you guys hear?
No, you're breaking up. It's okay. Joy can cover it, Brianna. If you can hear. Yeah.
All right. So every month we release a freight market report, chock full of meaningful data with tons of great commentary, mostly from Steve Beda, sometimes from guests. And we also have this monthly freight market report coverage of the webinar where we talk about timely topics as well as things that were covered in the report. You can subscribe. We'll make sure that the link is dropped in the comments so that you can get on that list to have it delivered to your inbox so you get the full report every single month. And then also on the topic of AI, we have a Trax Tech AI and supply chain blog. So it covers, very timely topics. It's literally released every single day on things that are trending in AI and supply chain, as well as a newsletter edition here on LinkedIn. Definitely follow us here on LinkedIn, the company page, and then subscribe to our YouTube channel. We are broadcast to both of those outlets right now. We're grateful for several hundred people who are watching us live right now. Awesome. Excited for the growth of this and all the interest that we've had. So Blake, Steve, Brianna, stoked y'all were here. I think it was a great conversation today. Appreciate you guys.
Last comment really quick. So if you're a existing customer of ours or a prospective customer of ours, we do something called a current state assessment. It's just part of the service that you paid for or that you are, and it's also for us to help sort of understand, can we help you or not? If you're curious about your ability to go deploy artificial intelligence, it's a great way to figure it out. The account teams will sit down with you and they're very transparent about what's going to work and what's not going to work. And can we even help you in that sense? And it's a great asset to go deploy. So I don't know many companies that do this. We work with NTT Data on some of these things as well. So you get really great results and it's, didn't cost you a dime to go figure out whether or not you're going to be successful. It's a good offer as far as I can tell. So just a thought.
Awesome.
That's a great point. Yeah. Like part of that business case development, right? Is the juice worth squeezing, right?
Is the juice worth the squeeze? Love it.
Thanks, Joy.
All right. Appreciate you guys. Everybody have a good rest of your day. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Brianna. Bye.